everyone. Thank you very much for coming and giving me this chance to share a little bit of my story. So I'll leave the introduction to the later because that is the hardest part. Okay. So people often tell me I probably have the shortest CDISID, as you can see there, thanks to my shortest possible surname. However, people still can't find me in the system because they just learned that I'm called Sophie. Where does the H come from? And that, actually, it was SMA before, if you didn't know. And that leads to the story where Sophie came about. So I grew up in a very undeveloped area, poor family, and I was educated by very strict parents of myself. So I actually learned from, as a little girl, I knew I didn't have much to rely upon. And also, having been in that tough situation, I also developed very strong wish that I want to change my life by myself. Despite trying to convince me, a lot of my families tell me that you should get married and not to study anymore. But I actually managed to convince my parents to give me most of their savings, gratefully with that, and also on a scholarship. I pulled a suitcase and then went on pursuing further education in a different country. Different language, completely unfamiliar culture, everything was a new experience to me. The sunset at 9 o'clock was a shock to me when I first arrived. If you say, that must be hard, try to do that. So I'll tell you, after I finally earned my degrees, very hard-earned degree, then the post-graduation was actually the start of hell. So I ran into situations like every time I went to an interview, I'm always the strange type, no matter race or gender. And I sat in an interview, I can see people looking at my CV. They don't relate to the name, they don't recognize any of my previous education history. They can't understand what the intern history is about. And then what's worse is there will be no contact after identity check. Even though sometimes the interview went very well, they wouldn't even bother tell me, email me to contact me after. And that happened, but I had to make a living. So then I had to take up whatever people would pay me to do. But sadly, I was drifting further away from my career path. Actually, that was a very tough time. For a long period, more and more of these tough experiences. And then I became very ashamed of myself. So ashamed that I wouldn't even contact my family and friends at home. If you ask some of my friends, I disappeared for a period. It was really tough at that time. I actually lost myself at that time, lost direction, and then I tried to blend myself in, tried to learn everything, tried to create some similarity in order to establish myself. And there actually had been a real situation that my name was actually giving me a problem. So there was a time I was very unwell. And then instead of knowing I should go to the GP, because from my previous knowledge, I was brought up that you should go to a hospital. So I actually turned up at the A&E, gave my name in, and then told to be sat down. And then I sat there for hours. And you can imagine being unwell, I was struggling to sit up. I cried to myself, when will somebody come to see me? Can somebody come to help me? But it just didn't happen until at the very end, a nurse came to me, tapped me on the shoulder and said, that must be you. I've been calling your name for ages. Well, unfortunately, it was hard to reach a similar pronunciation that I could recognize. And to that point, I realized how big a trouble my name was giving me. And you can imagine this adds further barrier for me to get any new job opportunity, lead to all that hurdle that I was going through. So I asked myself, how do I get out of this? And here it comes Sophie, an English, easily pronounceable name that I found with the same literal meaning as my Romanized name Hui, part of Huijie, which is what I found, so that I can create some similarity, hoping that I could become one of you. And luckily, I still pursued career and finally landed as an engineer. That must be tough after all that, but only until that point, I was able to go home, meet my family, who tried to convince me to forget about the idea of going abroad. I could actually tell them the young, brave self wasn't a failure, and I can actually create a future with my own hands. However, the story certainly didn't end from the first day I entered the factory. You may imagine being a rare female engineer, a different race as well, working in that manufacturing company will be very interesting. Because imagine in every introduction, this still continue to happen. There will be inevitable a pause when it comes to people have to say my name, or there will be introduction. I will need to try to earn people's attention, try to make people make the effort to practice saying my name. Totally not your fault, I understand that, but this is something that just continually happening. And there are also situations like in group meetings that I will be struggle to be recognized or to be addressed. These continue to happen. And after all, I can't always start a conversation with the weather. So then, here it is from myself, deep from my heart. I felt I really want to come forward. I want to do something to help listen and help anybody who's had doubt or may still have any struggle or similar experience. So then all these continue to happen. Sorry. But then now I chair our Inclusion Council. I rolled out a project to try to improve working experiences in environment. As a champion for the Gender Equality Network and Women Engineering and Allies Network, and very strongly reward any hard work that we do within ourselves. Through participating Reach, Lunch and Learns, I participate these like colorism and name campaign, or try to cultivate this safe and inclusive environment. We are a global company. We're branding for international customers. There is enormous need to have this diversified product imaging. And we all know that the global collaboration is all live for all of us now. In order to attract and retain multicultural, neurodiversified talent, we have to cultivate this safe and also heartwarming equal environment. Because global collaboration and international business is all live for all of us now. Whether you are interacting directly with the colleague or the teammate that are geographically separated, or whether whatever you're doing, your product chain is linked to somewhere like thousands of miles away, we are all part of this central of value creation. So now, next time when we meet, maybe we can have a chat, or maybe you can even practice saying my name, because after all, I'm not a stranger anymore.